Let me give you an analogy. Your hand and your racket should feel like the soft board when receiving the ball. If your hand is like a hard board, any forward push will send the ball flying off the table. Alright, today we're going to work on the push. First, let's address the problem of popping the ball up. Against the same light backspin, using the lower half of your racket face lets you keep the ball low. If you use the upper half, your push will go high. I always say you need to drop your wrist when pushing. Because for both shakehand and penhold grips, if you don't drop your wrist, your racket face is flat. By keeping the racket angle more vertical, you naturally drop your wrist. With a vertical racket angle, as long as you don't scoop the bottom of the ball, it's much harder to pop it up. You need to use the lower half of the racket to slice forward and downward. This lets you push low, push with spin, and push with speed. Otherwise, if you push with a flat racket, the ball will have neither speed nor much spin. I believe pushing a backspin ball is like chopping. You need to have that chopping feeling. To chop effectively, your racket must be higher than the ball. For example, when pushing, I have to lift my racket to ensure the ball's first bounce hits the lower half of my blade. So, I need to drop my wrist and raise my racket. Because only by dropping the wrist can you get the racket vertical, and only with a vertical racket can you slice the ball. If your racket face is too open and you contact the bottom of the ball, that motion is called scooping. Only by contacting the lower half can you get a longer friction path, which prevents you from popping the ball up. This applies to heavy backspin too. Your push goes into the net against heavy spin because you're just blocking it. If you can create enough friction to overcome the spin, you won't hit the net. At most, your racket face might be slightly more open, but you must still contact the ball with the lower half. So always remember, in table tennis, you must be sensitive to spatial awareness. The incoming ball can be high or low, and you might need to push either one. Therefore, when we push, we must constantly adjust to the ball's height. You also need to adjust for its depth. The second key point: you must use the tip of the racket to push. Why do many players make mistakes on the push? Because when they use power, the ball goes long. But if they don't use power, the return is weak, and the opponent is waiting to attack. Remember this: the main source of power for a push is not the arm. While you can use your arm for a long push, all the explosive force should come from the tip of your racket. Pay close attention to the movement of my racket tip. That push was both spinny and aggressive. Watch my racket tip. The action comes from the tip's rotation, not from the arm. This is true for both shakehand and penhold grips. Never underestimate the effect you can get from just the tip of the racket. Just that small motion of the racket tip, from parallel to pointing at the table, adds a ton of spin to the ball. Never rely on your arm to generate speed and spin. The arm is just there to provide a bit of forward stability. The rest of the power comes from the racket tip. So your push must either be very short or very deep, just like with serves. You either drop it short or you push it deep. Pushing a ball with just a little spin only works against beginners. Any player with decent friction skills won't be troubled by it. When we push, you need to feel this. Before contact and during the forward motion, stay relaxed. Only as the racket starts to swing forward should you apply force. This is much better than being tense from the start. Look, right now my hand is loose and soft. I can just block the ball back, right? Now my hand is very stiff. See how tense it is? If I block like this, the ball goes out. When your grip is too tight and rigid, your racket naturally becomes very bouncy. And this is a hard, uncontrollable bounce, not a soft, flexible one. Let me give you an analogy. Your hand and your racket should feel like the soft board when receiving the ball. See how it absorbs the impact? It doesn't spring back. If your hand is stiff, it becomes like this hard board. When the ball comes, it just bounces right off. But you have to make a forward motion, right? If your hand is like a hard board, any forward push will send the ball flying off the table. That's exactly what happens when you grip the racket too tightly. The same principle applies to pushing. Because when the opponent serves, if your initial touch is soft, you can grip the ball. Then, in the second part of your motion, you can add power effectively. If your initial contact is hard, any added power will just shoot the ball off the table. This is why many players with a stiff hand lack a good feel for the ball. When the ball hits your racket and your grip is tense, the racket becomes rigid and powerful. Any small movement you make gets amplified. Against backspin, if your hand is stiff, you can't generate friction because the ball leaves the racket too quickly. Against topspin, you're afraid to use power for fear of hitting it long. When you push, a hard push goes out, and a soft push goes high, forcing you to back up to mid-distance just to get the ball on the table. At a higher level, a solid technical framework is just the foundation. Why do many players have great-looking strokes but perform poorly in matches? Because becoming an expert requires 4 things: a solid technical foundation and good footwork. Footwork is the second level of advancement. The third is your ability to adjust, anticipate, and self-correct. The fourth is your match strategy and tactical ability. Let's say you're only at level 1. We'll skip level 2, which is slow footwork. Level 3 is about adjustment. You don't know how to handle fast balls, slow balls, high balls, or low balls. And why can't you adjust? Because your hand is too stiff. For instance, if I see my opponent's serve is very spinny, what do? If it's a short ball, I pay attention and use a soft touch first, then push. If the serve isn't very spinny, I can be more aggressive and push through it more firmly. Why? Because with less spin, I'm not afraid of the ball going long. Look at Wang Chuqin. For a male athlete, his flexibility is incredible. He can do a full split after stretching. If you grip your racket like a meat cleaver, so tightly that your palm hurts afterward, or if your joints ache, it's all because your grip is too tight. If you grip the racket that tightly, you'll have no feel for any short ball with spin or any long ball that requires friction, no matter what racket you use. So why is my push spinnier, more consistent, and faster than yours? This is the key. Because before I contact the ball, my grip is very relaxed. Start with a relaxed grip, and then, at the very moment of contact, go from loose to tight. This transition from relaxed to accelerated allows you to grip the ball first. Then, using the second part of your motion, you can drive it forward, instead of having it just bounce off the racket instantly. For example, a stiff hand will cause you to just punch the ball on contact, making any subsequent friction you try to apply ineffective. At the moment of contact, your hand must be soft and relaxed. After that initial relaxed contact, you can then apply force in the follow-through. That's how you can push aggressively. Otherwise, even if you learn all the techniques for adding power, you'll never be able to execute them in a match. Exactly. In a match, your body gets tense, and you'll forget everything I've taught today. Let me explain my personal feeling when I push. During my backswing, I'm just holding the racket. As I move forward to meet the ball, I'm still just holding it, because I can't be making contact during the backswing. As I move to the ball, at the moment of contact, that's when I start to apply force. But if I only apply that force, the ball won't clear the net because there's not enough forward momentum. So, after applying that initial force, I use my forearm to send it forward. That's the feeling of my push. So, I'm just holding the racket, moving to the ball while still holding it lightly, and then applying force at the instant of contact. The power generation in a push is incredibly brief. The motion is tiny, just a very small burst. This is the same for both shakehand and penhold grips. So what happens after that burst of power? You follow through with your forearm. The sequence of force application is absolutely critical. If, at the moment of contact, you don't first brush the ball to create friction, you'll just end up punching it straight off the table. The correct sequence is, first the friction, then the forearm follow through. Let me break it down. When the ball comes, you first apply friction. See how it doesn't clear the net? Then, after that initial brushing motion, you add the forearm push, and that's how you add spin. It's not one single motion. There are two distinct feelings within that one stroke. The first feeling comes from your fingers. Remember, all wrist rotation is initiated by the fingers. If you only use your wrist, you lose the forearm's contribution, and the ball will lack both speed and heavy spin. The wrist can generate spin, but it has a limited range of motion, so the spin is not concentrated. Using your fingers is much faster and more focused. Even if you flick your wrist as hard as you can, it can't match the speed of your fingers. So, it's one motion, but with two sensations. The fingers drive the action, creating a snap or inch power. After that snap, the forearm naturally follows through. A push executed this way will be very spinny. That's how you add heavy spin. Let me demonstrate with a few more pushes. Very spinny. Fourth point, you must stay close to the ball when you push. For example, if the ball is here, you have to be right here to push it. If the ball is here, you push from here. If it's over there, you move there to push. Never allow space to open up between you and the ball. For instance, if the serve is here, but I take my backswing way back here, I'm too far. If I try to add power by moving forward from that distance, the ball will fly off the table. You have no idea how much spin is on his serve. So, if the serve is here and I'm far away, I don't dare to push it aggressively. But if I'm close to the ball, watch how confidently I can add power. It's that simple. I can truly add power, making the push spinny and deep. You have to get close to the ball to push effectively. Only then can you be confident in adding power. Otherwise, if there's any distance, your forward motion combines with the ball's incoming speed, creating a combined force that's very difficult to control. Ultimately, why do so many players resort to just patting the ball back? Because they keep hitting it long. So they just block it hoping to get it on the table and maybe force an error. Stay close to the ball. If I stand this close, I can push aggressively without making a mistake. But if I'm back here, using the same motion, it's a different story. The combined force comes into play. Staying close doesn't mean you need a huge backswing. You need to get into position close to the ball from the start. Don't hesitate. Because the closer you are, the safer it is to apply power in your follow-through. When you can confidently apply power and friction, you won't get attacked with a powerful loop. It's when you just pat the ball back that you invite a strong attack.